Hey, everybody, it's Sally, and this is Headspace for the Workplace. It's a podcast on how to cultivate vibrant and psychologically safe and healthy workplaces. And today we're talking about a really important topic. Before we get to introducing my incredible guest, I just want to honor one of the members of our community who did pass a couple of years ago. Her name is Diana Cortez Yanez, and she really helped me understand that one size does not fit all when it comes to mental health programs. We were actually working in construction, and we really talked about the importance of having things be culturally informed, or it's just not going to reach the audience. And so I wanted to first give her a nod to talk about that work-related part of suicide prevention and mental health promotion that I think sometimes we overlook. Today, we're going to be talking with my dear friend, longtime fellow advocate for awesomeness, Assistant Chief Manny Almaguer. Manny, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm really glad you're here. And before we dig into all of the things, can you tell us the two things that our audience will take away from today? What are the two tactical takeaways?
Cultural empathy is key, and common unity is critical.
All right, let's dig into that. But first, let's learn more about you. What do you do every day? Tell our listeners what's your work. What do you do every day?
I'm an assistant chief with the Denver Fire Department. I'm in my 25th year. So
25
an
years.
assistant chief would be an equivalent of an executive in the workplace, where we manage, we lead, we oversee day-to-day operations, and that's everything from in the fire service, from handling emergency incidents to administrative tasks and duties.
Awesome. And also, Manny has been a super advocate for the lived experience voice as a former board member for United Suicide Survivors International. And we partnered for quite some time, about a decade or so ago. It's a long time ago, in really helping move the fire service forward and thinking about a mental health strategy that went beyond just trauma response. And I think, he's going to bring a lot of good thinking here about that. But we also have a very specific topic today, which is about, culturally informed mental health practices. Before we get into those, what's something unusual about you, Manny, that when people learn about you, they're like, didn't see that coming?
Kind of contradictory. The first one is I'm a huge music lover, specifically heavy metal music, and I travel across the country
The
to see
globe.
concerts.
Don't let him fool you. He goes all over the world to see these
Yes,
concerts.
in fact, I'm going to Mexico City tomorrow for a 2-day concert. And the second one, which is kind of a contradiction, is I've never tasted alcohol in my life.
That is a good juxtaposition. Yes, because there's a lot of stereotypes about everything, and straight heavy metal doesn't always go together, but there you are. Awesome. Um, and tell us why you care about this topic. So I know this is a work-related kind of issue that I think people don't always think about when they think about mental health promotion and suicide prevention. Why does getting this right, having really culturally informed mental health ways of thinking, matter to you? What's your story?
It's been at both ends of the spectrum as a brand new recruit or even an applicant as a civilian who was looking at changing careers into the fire service, really not knowing anything about the fire service other than what I read. And it starts from the day you start picking up a book and you start looking and studying concepts that me as a Latino student never learned in school. You're talking about calculations and hydraulics, and a lot of it really took a lot of perseverance and resiliency to continue on that path to even bring myself to a position to apply. And then when the fire service, back when I applied 25 years ago, there were 4,000 people who applied for 40 positions. So it's very intimidating and almost caused me to retrieve and to give up on my dream of being a firefighter. So then you started to unpeel layers on these obstacles and barriers that were in the way to me achieving to be a member of the fire service, a civil servant, and to give back to my community. And there was just not many people that looked like me that I could go to, people that I could have as mentors. In fact, I had to drive myself to the fire academy, into the parking lot, walk into the academy and say, I'm looking to get a job. Is there anybody that can help me? Because this just wasn't readily information. You have to keep in mind the fire service, a lot of it's legacy. A lot of it are fathers, sons, uncles, grandchildren. So somebody come off the street and not know how to navigate through. It's a very, very lonely place, a very daunting place. And then coming full spectrum as a leader in the fire service, I've been a command officer for about 12 years. You can start to see the waves of the new recruits coming in who don't have, say, the life experience, who maybe don't have the experience of having a trade like many of the forefathers of the fire service had. So a lot of them are coming from corporate America, some are coming from college, some are coming from the military, and you can and then you have to morph in there the cultural experience that they are bringing. So it's very important that, and I'm so grateful and I feel so accomplished that I'm in a position to be in a leader, to be a leader and to give back, to those who are in that same position, possibly as I was 25 years ago.
So you've really reflected on that loneliness piece when you are the only one that looks the way you do, or the only one with the last name that identifies you as a certain cultural group, and you don't see the representation in the organization. Not only do you have all the stresses that everybody does when they come into a new job of trying to figure out, where the bathroom is and how to do a daunting task and learning the skills, but then you're also like, well, where are people like me? And forging, being the first, not only do you have to sometimes prove that you were worthy to be there because there's not anybody else that looks or sounds or is like your cultural group, but then you also, I know I've heard this from other groups, that they feel like they have to represent all the other people behind them who also want to get into this work, and they have to show like above and beyond. So there's a lot of things that lend people to feel very isolated and alone. Was that your experience?
Absolutely. And another thing that was a stressor to me at the time is there were not members of my family that agreed with my choice of profession. That's very dangerous, then you feel like you're adding stress to your mother, and you don't feel like you have the blessing or the approval to move on with your dream. So you have that internal stressor as well. So it is a very lonely place, and it's a place where you often feel dejected. You often feel like there's just no room for you in this space. And even though when I showed up to take the written exam, there were 4,000 people, it's a very intimidating place when you see a sea of blue with everybody in their fire t-shirts or testing from all over the country. And like I has mentioned before, don't think it didn't cross my mind for me to turn around, walk the other way, and give up on my dream.
Mm. Does take a lot of perseverance, especially if you're forging forward alone. I know the other part that got our paths to cross was when, the department's beloved Captain Steve Magana took his life by suicide, again, a little over a decade ago. And I vividly remember, after we'd had a couple conversations, when you and several other members of FIRE, which I'll have you explain in a second, found your way to us. And I just remember looking out at the sea of your faces in that little conference room and just seeing the anguish and the grief of the suicide impact on the whole fire service, but in particular, your very tight knit, Latino advocate community inside the Denver Fire Department. Can you talk a little bit about that experience and its impact on you?
Sure. So FIRE stands for Firefighters Incorporated for Racial Equality. It's an employee group of the Denver Fire Department, which started in around 1973. And it followed the waves of the Chicano movement, which was going on across the United States at the time, where there was conversations and protests about equity in pay, equity and representation in the workplace. So it had been long standing by the time I joined the department, and I joined the very first day that I joined the department, I signed up for it and was an active member. And when Captain Magana took his life in, I want to say around 2013, members of FIRE rallied around each other because we had no choice. We were broken, we were crippled, and it was almost the mentality, if not us, then who? How are we going to carry this torch, this flag to promote wellness in the workplace? But what really was inspirational for me on the principles and the pillars of FIRE and what they were built on, which is equity, which is education, which is community. So that behind you, you know, you're representing not just members of your organization, but you're representing community. And at that time, we didn't really have conversations in the fire service about suicide prevention and mental health. It was so taboo. So as you remember, Sally, we started having those conversations. They were very difficult for us. They were heart-wrenching for us, and they were very uncomfortable for us, but we knew that we had to go through this to come out and break on through to the other side, to where we had a workplace that had just started to have programs which started to take care of its members. But speaking for me, I cannot overemphasize the sense of belonging I had with that employee group, the
Mm-hmm.
sense of pride I had with that employee group, the sense of history I had with that employee group, where it became almost a mission within a mission to carry forward the overarching caring for people in the workplace.
And the trust and the bond that happen, that often happens in the midst of tragedy, but it preceded that because there was this culture of advocacy and we've got each other's back and together we're stronger. Like all of that was already going on when this happened. And so it made sense that this became like the home base for this group to grieve together and to advocate together. It was actually pretty remarkable to be a witness to the work of that group to move things forward with such passion and determination. So thank you for inviting me to be a partner in that. Let's unpack your two takeaways. What do you mean, first of all, by cultural empathy, and why is it a key factor in any workplace that's trying to get this right to make a mental health and well-being systems and cultural change initiative that is actually impacting all the people, not just the majority population?
Sure. Anybody who has followed progressive organizations, progressive companies, they put in as part of their DEI programs, cultural competence. And cultural competence, from many I've talked to in the Latino community, it is a way of acquired learning about my culture. And I'm going to master what I know about your culture, and I'm going to put programs in place for you to fit in. Where cultural empathy is now about building that relationship. It's about respect, and it's about admitting I may not know everything about your culture. I don't want to pretend like I do know everything about your culture, but I want to include you in your experiences to strengthen programs and processes in the workplace, which I think is so valid and must. I even go across saying it's encouraged. I say it's a must in the workplace.
And you've already given us an example, and I think a couple of other additional examples will really drive this home. You said your decision to be a firefighter kind of went against your family's idea of what Manny should be doing as a young person, and that kind of going against your family thing is significant. Can you just talk like sometimes we miss the boat on really understanding the power of certain cultural ties in people's decision making about what they're doing with their life and how that does show up at work?
Sure, and it goes to such a strong tie with family. So, I grew up in a very close-knit family, very supportive family, and my parents' approval was the utmost important to me. So you never want to do anything to bring shame or disrespect to your family. And so that even goes into mental health. When you start talking about mental health, you don't ever want to air your dirty laundry and shame your family. But also at the time, which was also very, um, I guess, a trigger in my early adulthood, is somewhat of the role reversal that I was involved in as a teenager up until my early 20s, where you're starting to take on more of the burdens for your family. And I see this more with our Latinos who are, maybe possibly undocumented. Now they're facing role reversal. They have to take care of a lot of the day in and day outs for their family. So an added stressor. So there's that strong tie, which is so powerful. And you don't ever, and you're also coming into a family with the fire service. And so, you're living at home with your family, such strong ties, and you go into another environment for 24 hours where it's another strong tie, where you're starting to really, really learn about your family members, their strengths, their weaknesses. And it's difficult because then sometimes you feel like you have no place to hide. You can't, you have
Hmm.
to be true, you have to be true at home, and you have to be true in your home in the firehouse too. So very, very, very strong. And we look, and I speak for me, I looked up to my parents who were my mentors. My father was in law enforcement, my mother was in healthcare. And so it was just a natural extension for me to give back to my community and to put myself in a position where I felt I was making a difference in the workplace and in my community as well. So those are two things I talk about were the importance of choosing the profession I chose, but also some of the stresses that it caused me.
And I think another one that you brought up when we were chatting before is, like in some Latino communities, like the strength of faith and the role of ideas about faith when it comes to mental health and what you're supposed to do. And sometimes that is not what's being talked about at the mental health programs and policies and benefits at work. And sometimes those things are at odds. Can you speak to that a little bit as well?
Sure, sure. Faith-based, approaches to mental health have been part of my upbringing. And it's kind of a two sides to it. Sometimes if you're having dark days, or sometimes if you're having thoughts that are harmful, you go and you hear from your mentors, well, you don't pray enough, Manny. That's why
Hmm.
you're in this position. So then you go and you pray, but then you crave that element of spirituality. At least for me, it was um, another layer of safety and security for me, and another outlet. So there's such a strong tie with faith based, and it's not uncommon for many in the Latino population to look at other approaches such as herbs, medicines. I've read books on the use of curanderos who are more spiritual healers, where they kind of bring that approach in there and balance it with the treatment that you're receiving, from the general population. And then another thing that's also, and I think I touched about it earlier, is there's even a lot of internal shame from your own through assimilation and acculturation. So I want to go and practice the predominant population's method of treatment by seeking therapy, going to a counselor, where there's the elders saying, "Why are you doing that? Now you're bringing shame to the family. Now you're kind of exposing us, and the generational trauma that may have been caused from your upbringing." And then there's also assimilation, like you want to be part of the environment in the workplace. You want to start adapting new methodologies of self-help, whether that be podcasts, websites, reading med journals, and those are things that I just never grew up with, but they have been part of just acculturation and assimilation.
Mhm. A lot of richness there, a lot of things to think about. Let's go on to the second tactic. You talk about common unity is critical. What do you mean by common unity?
Common unity is community. So I come from community. I have a sense of safety. I have a sense of security. I have a sense of purpose in community. So that's one of the reasons I gravitated towards public safety and the fire service. It's all wrapped up into one. You're part of the community, even though you're a civil servant, you still are part of the fiber of you is you just have such strong ties. So I go back to what I talked about with FIRE. It was a common place where people who had the same values of giving back to the community and making a difference in the community in using our platform to create change in a positive way in the community. And a lot of it has to do with relationship building. A lot of it has to do with having some skin in the game. If you come from the community, you have friendships in the community, you have partners in the community. And when you get into positions of leadership and you get into positions of influence, it's easy for people in the community to gravitate towards you for priorities. And I'll be very, very honest, with that FIRE and what we went through back in 2013, there were people from the community that knew we were hurting. There were people from the community that knew we were crippled by the suicide of Captain Magana. So why would they not want to come in and try to help us when that's what we have done as firefighters? So it's just taking care of the people who take care of you. So it's a powerful force. It's a powerful energy to carry that pride, the history of the community with you as you move forward in any type of program in the workplace.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things there, but the two things that are sticking out to me is that sense of high trust in those relationships. And so the relationships are rich and deep because of some common shared meaningful identity, experience, that kind of thing. But then also you are looking outward together about some kind of change, some kind of purpose. So it's a place to feel safe and bonded with people, which of course is always a good thing for mental health when the relationships are good. But then also this sense of advocacy and agency, and that together we can make changes that by ourselves we're not able to make. That sense of solidarity is also really healing. So I know they didn't all necessarily start out of this place about being mindful of mental health, but I do think the whole employee resource group movement that is happening in a lot of larger organizations has this incredible benefit. You've got a group of people that have similar experiences, that find that common unity together, that find that deep sense of trust and community and relationships, but then are also advocating together for the betterment of the well-being of their people, whatever that means, whether it's pay equity or, systems and cultural change. And that's just really a great addition to mental health as usual at work, finding these pockets of community, common unity, where people can come together and have that kind of sense of safety. So I'll just do a really quick recap, Manny, and then I'm gonna come back to you for your final word on this topic. So we're talking again today with Assistant Chief Manny, who I've known for a long time, and just deeply respect your work, Manny. I've just loved every project we've done together. You are a powerful voice in a lot of different arenas. So I just want to say thank you for standing up for so many for so long. And we've talked about the importance of not feeling like you can be competent in somebody else's culture, but maybe listen and develop relationships to more deeply understand. We talked a little bit about the power of mentoring, especially when people are first coming into an environment where they might be the only one of their kind, and they don't know what the map is. Just having someone to walk alongside and said, "Oh, I've been down this path before, and we're going to figure this out together," can do so much for people not to have that sense of loneliness. We talked about cultural empathy. We talked about common unity, the importance of pulling together and having that pain to purpose moment, but as a group can be so healing for people. Manny, what's one thing you want to make sure everybody knows and is a big moment for them to take away from our conversation today?
Last week, I just happened to watch again the movie Field of Dreams. And the voice, when it talks to Kevin Costner, it says, "Go the distance." And that really resonated with me. And I went back to 2013 when we started to have conversations and do the work around mental health and suicide prevention. And so when I say go the distance, we were hard chargers. We came out of the starting gate with a purpose. And not only did we make suicide prevention and mental health a priority in the workplace, we were unapologetic about it. And with that came, some lumps we had to take. We had to cross some crossroads. But during that, I knew we had to go the distance in order for this to be sustainable. And we had to start encouraging dialogue. We had to start being supportive of the dialogue. We had to start encouraging people of all walks of life, all lived experiences, to have a voice and a seat at the table to create that culture change. And we did reach the finish line, a couple of years after we rolled that out. And it's more relevant now than it ever has, that we have to continue to move on to the next race, to go the distance, and to continue to empower people, and to be involved, and to have a voice, and to be able to have access to information, access to up-to-date best practices in the mental health industry. And it's and so that's what I mean when I say go the distance.
Excellent. Thank you so much. If people want to connect with you, they should use what form of communication?
LinkedIn would be the best.
Okay, great. Thank you again, Manny. I hope our paths continue to cross in all the ways. And thanks to Dave and Mitchell and Whitney and Chase and Elias and the whole team of people behind this podcast, making it awesome. And thanks to you, all the listeners, for coming out today and being a part of our conversation. So in closing, remember, working minds work well together. There's lots we can learn from each other to improve well-being at the workplace. Until we meet again.